Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of the Square Circle Podcast. We're your host, Marie Shadows, and we do something a little bit different here, where it is a review show of MLW Kingdom Colosseum, but also I have a special guest joining me. You guys might know who he is from the Twitter world because he speaks very well. I love all of his wisdom, little nuggets that he presents to the wrestling community, and he means very, very well, even though you guys know him as Dose Evo, and he's pretty cool and awesome. So Dose, welcome to the Square Circle Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. What a nice introduction. I'm really excited to be here. We have some things in common, and we have some Twitter friends in common, and we have some real life, friends in common. So it's about time.
Yes, it really is about time. That's just like on my part, because I'm always like a lone wolf to like be doing this on my own, because that's just how I am. But I am always glad to share the spotlight with others and bring them on and talk about wrestling, because I think that wrestling overall just like unites us in some like weird way, because it's a combination of everything that we like in entertainment. So I guess the first question I'm gonna ask you, because I think the wrestling community should know. How did you get into wrestling and being the fan that you are and that people see on Twitter?
It's funny, but first of all, I think folks should know then that I'm 56 years old. I'm going to be Heinz 57 this year. So the actual first wrestling match that I remember seeing is Muhammad Ali, Antonio Inoki. I'm pretty sure it was on ABC's Wide World of Sports, which no longer exists. Then my next memories of wrestling are that the betrayals of Bruno Sammartino by Larry Zbyszko actually made the local news, because I grew up in New York. And then as such, so did the betrayal of Larry Zbyszko by Eddie Gilbert, even though that was somewhere else, just because of the betrayal of Bruno Sammartino was taken so personally by New Yorkers. The WWF was the promotion at the time. It transitioned to WWF, probably in my single digit years. For my 2 years for my birthday, I made my father take me and a bunch of my friends to the Nassau Colosseum. I didn't know house shows weren't as important as TV.
Yeah.
So my favorite tag team was Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson. And They were chasing the Samoans, and the Samoans, then got a third guy. And so they were, Samu. And so they were beating them up. So so it was very important to me that Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson would win. So first they had SD Jones. And so you sort of knew where that was going, but as an 11-year-old, you hope different. Then they got Ivan Putski, and you're like, oh, well, he's a real guy. He's the Polish Power. Nope, they still lose. Finally, they get Andre the Giant as their six-man partner. And so I saw all those shows in Nassau Coliseum. And I'm sure like everyone else saw those shows in every other city that they went to as well. But I thought I was the only one. I'm still upset because the whole thing is no one could break out of the Cobra Clutch. Jimmy Superfly Snuka, while being put into the Cobra Clutch, put his arms up and slid out. And I thought that should count as breaking the Cobra Clutch. And also the spoiler, who I just got introduced to because we just got cable, and I was seeing Georgia Championship Wrestling. The spoiler, he used to walk the ropes like The Undertaker did, but beforehand, way before there was an Undertaker, he was debuting for WWF, and he was supposed to be in the Nassau Coliseum, and I guess the contract didn't work out. He wasn't there, and that was the first time I experienced in real time card subject to change. But I think I actually experienced the worst card subject to change of all time, which was whatever Great American Bash 1991, I believe it was, when it was supposed to be Ric Flair versus Lex Luger, and Ric Flair didn't show up and kidnapped the belt, and instead we got Lex Luger versus Barry Windham in a cage, and JJ Dillon, like all son, was managing Barry Windham, and everyone's like, what?
Wow, man. Okay, so I'm like smiling from ear to ear. Obviously this is going to be audio for people that are listening on Spotify and YouTube and all of that. I'm smiling from ear to ear because I didn't know that you were from New York, so that makes us like buddies either way. And just the way that you were telling how you went to the house shows and your dad took you and your friends, and that's exactly how my whole love for wrestling got started. It started with that. That's like some really core memories, man.
My dad is 83, and but he's healthier than I am, by the way. He'll probably outlive me, but he still tells me every now and then, like at least twice a year, you know that stuff is fake, right? Like if a guy that looked like that is 280 pounds punches you, you're dead. You would die. I'm like, yeah, I know it's fake. I get it. I understand. He's like, okay.
That was interesting. I didn't think that this would take a twist like that.
No, still tells me. I mean, he remembers Haystacks Calhoun and goes back. I mean, still talks about Gorgeous George like we talk about Ric Flair. But yeah.
Oh my God. So, from all the memories that you just shared with us, which is amazing. The next question would be, who from back then would you have on your roster to start your own promotion?
Oh God. That's such a good question. I mean, it's so tough because who these people are and how some of them
Yeah.
turned out and things like that. I mean, I think Andre the Giant is a really safe answer. Big John Studd is a counter monster, absolutely. I mean, Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson, but I mean, the first people that I saw and turned on TV, other than Andre Johnson, like, I can't believe there's really people like this that look like this in real life. Because like
Yeah.
bodybuilding was a thing. I mean, Mr. Olympia was actually like, was probably like one of the top 10 sports in the country back then. I mean, now, bodybuilding is like, below bull riding. But the first time I saw the Road Warriors, I was like, oh my God. So the Road
Yeah.
Warriors, I mean, and then, the Russian Menace, yes, the Foreign Menace, I'd go with Nikita Koloff and the Iron Sheik. I mean, that would probably be my starting point. And I guess as a perfect baby, Ricky Steamboat clearly, and
Oh,
Billy Graham. I mean, you can't not say Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, but I don't know. I'm going
yeah,
to
yeah.
not say Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair just because I'm sort of tired of both of them at this point.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's totally fine. But anyway, it's your choices. But so now that my audience knows a little bit about your background and stuff like that, I wanted to quickly just jump into Japanese wrestling and just wanted to know, when in general did you get introduced to like Japanese wrestling?
Well, I mean, like the first match I saw involved Antonio Inoki, so I knew it
Oh,
existed.
okay.
Um,
I mean, okay. So after that, did you continue? Like, did you have interest to like follow Japanese wrestling?
Only to the extent that my favorite wrestlers were monsters and giants and looked like they came out of comic books, and all of them went to Japan to make money. So Dr. Death and Scott Norton and the Road Warriors and Bruiser
Uh-huh.
Brody, and you'd see excerpts of them going to Japan and just killing people. Stan Hansen,
Yeah, yeah,
Black
yeah.
Blackjack Sullivan, all of that. So that was a lot of fun. And the magazines covered them. And back then, you bought magazines, and you couldn't buy one without a couple. And basically, I bought them for my superheroes. But then I'd see all these weirdly out of shape blonde guys with masks of red, and their hair was all red, and it was like Tommy Wildfire Rich, Dusty Rhodes. Sorry,
Yeah.
everyone pretends Dusty was a legend at the time, and he was in the South, but he really wasn't anyplace else. He's a much bigger legend, later than he was at the time, at least
Yeah.
nationally. But that's, I mean, I knew a little bit about, I knew it existed. I knew they had promotions, but I didn't watch it, but I didn't hate it. I mean, I love Muda was great. I love Masahiro Chono was my player of choice when it was, I think, WCW versus the World, which was the last wrestling video game I was competent at. So, I mean, I knew it existed, but
Hmm.
that was really it. I wasn't really interested, much out of the United States. Every now, back in the day, you had 4 channels, and like sometimes you could get UHF and VHF, and if
Yeah.
you move the rabbit ears or the little circle thing the right way, every now and then you could find Lucha Libre, but half the time it was on like this a game show like Sabado Gigante, and they would have like lucha matches in between segments. So it's not even like you were looking for it, but sometimes you'd find it. But I have to be, I wasn't particularly interested in anything other than, I'm still the same, really. I'm not particularly interested in much other than the business crossovers and where somebody comes from and where they go to, than my good old United States wrestling.
That's true. Which I wanted to follow up because since I cover New Japan extensively and I help you out with like, whatever questions you might need answered. Let's see. What would be a good follow-up question? I guess the first thing would be like with everything that you see on Twitter and like what I talk about, what other people talk about, it does not interest you to follow anything that New Japan Pro Wrestling does because of the wrestlers that you see there, or you just don't get what's going on.
There's an evolution to this. So,
Okay.
I've lived in Maryland since 1990, Baltimore area. So, when Sinclair acquired Ring of Honor, Baltimore was basically its hometown. So I went to most, if not all, of the Ring of Honor shows. And at a certain point,
Uh-huh.
that really only meant like, 4 a year. And because their TV was just their pay-per-views or whatever, divided up over hour-long TV shows with segments. But Ring of Honor had a very successful relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling. And they had young boys. I mean, Jay White was a young boy. He was a young lion on excursion. So I saw all the LIJ, the matches against what you call the elite now. They weren't calling themselves anything at the time necessarily. So I enjoyed that, and I liked knowing what was going on and who was what. I mean, I have to be honest, I wasn't particularly impressed by it. I mean, I liked Naito, I liked Evil, I liked Sonata. I mean, there were people I liked, but they weren't my superheroes. I mean, most modern wrestling, they're not my superheroes. So I struggle with that. It's either adapt or you watch something else. But I was definitely more invested back then because it was part of what I was watching and what I was paying to see. So I was invested. I have to pass over time. I mean, especially post AEW when they started hiring all of their top guys away, and so many of them. I mean, afterthought, because if you want to watch the best of New Japan, you don't need New Japan. You could just watch it now. Now, what's AEW's done with them, you've covered that extensively. I've in other places, don't need to talk about it. So I'm really not interested in them all. But unfortunately, the evil dose part of me proved right, is that none of these guys are a draw in the United States. And it's proven none of these guys are a draw in the United States.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I haven't really spoken too much about like who's a draw, who's not a draw, but you really do see it. But I really do think that when New Japan Pro Wrestling still had the weekly shows of New Japan Strong leading into a New Japan Strong pay-per-view, like for the months as well, I think that's where I can say that they are a draw, but they were drawing like 2,000 plus, maybe like 3,000 like max, and I could say that that could be considered a draw for like that type of branding and like touring. But yeah, eventually we all got to talk about it, how like they're not really drawing as much as they should, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, that's a draw. If one person sells a ticket, you're a draw to someone. I mean, a draw for somebody who's getting a $1 to $3 million a year salary, more is expected.
Yeah, I totally get that.
TV and live, and it's just, and to just keep signing one after another to get. I mean, part of it is you're ruining the cachet of your own signings by just having a parade of signing. I mean, let Jay White get established before you sign the next guy. Then don't have Okada sign and then Will Ospreay like a month later. I mean, it's like you're running of the bulls. It's like no bull becomes impressive because it's just a herd. So. I know Tony Khan likes to collect toys, but I sort of said I'm not going to talk about what AEW has done to them, but so I won't.
Oh yeah, I mean, cool, but yeah. So the last question before we get into the MLW stuff is throughout all of your knowledge of watching wrestling for like all these years of going to the shows and interacting with wrestlers and fans and talking with people. What are 3 things that you can tell the audience that what wrestling needs in modern times?
I think wrestling needs more monsters. I think they need. I mean, I don't know. I think they need less gatekeeping, but I also think they need, and this will probably surprise people, I think they need less of what WWE did on the Netflix premiere. I don't think that brought a single new eye that's into wrestling. That was not a wrestling show. That was like an award show with 3 or 4 wrestling matches in it. And since then, they've just done regular Raw. So, I mean, I think the formatting needs to be changed so that it's less predictable, less formulaic, and less about. I mean, I almost felt like I was on a cruise ship where there was like, multimedia events, and like, one of them every 20 minutes you'd have a wrestling match, and then you'd have 25 minutes of like cabaret or and then go gamble and then see another wrestling match. So, I mean, people were raving about it, and I was in the Spaces live, and I'm like, this is terrible. Like, if I'm a new person watching this for the first time, I'm like, what the hell is this? This is a variety show. So, I mean, I think wrestling should stop being embarrassed by what it is, but it also should stop trying to pretend that it's something that's not. Like, it's not a real sport, so you don't need people to be freaking killing themselves. I mean, I think the one thing Roman Reigns has taught us is a character and a story and an arc and a plan works better than other things. But you also have to plan to pivot to a new story, just like any good TV show. With wrestling, you've got new characters, so you can do that all the time. Keep it fresh.
Yeah. And then maybe a third one, or was 2 like 2 and 3?
I don't know. I felt like I said 3.
Okay.
But if I come up with anything brilliant in the interim, I'll let you know.
Okay. I do want to quickly touch on the WWE to like Netflix thing, the Raw episode. I took it for what it was, the face value of like vibing, having a good time, and feeling those emotions. I don't think their plan was to try to get new eyes, to try to do something innovative. I think it was more towards playing towards Hollywood and the casuals and the people that fell off. And if you introduce old wrestlers with the new wrestlers, you might get some eyes. But I don't think they really matter or care about that, because everyone has Netflix in their home. So they're going to get the eyes anyway. So they took the safe route to play to people that are dormant to wrestling or in Hollywood, and they're like, oh my God, WWE is still around. So that's how I took it.
Yeah, no, I think that's what they did, but I think they did the wrong homework assignment. Like, if they were going to do like a tribute to wrestling show on, NBC on Sunday night or something, or Netflix, that might have been perfectly fine. But it wasn't. It was supposed to be introduce, more people around the world to a wrestling show, and it wasn't exciting. And then, if anybody paid attention, meaning any new people paid attention, all they would hear was complaints that The Rock was last we saw him, he was a heel, and now he's doing like an acceptance speech at the Golden Globe. So like people are saying that show was meant to attract non-wrestling fans, lapsed fan, new eyes. I disagree entirely. I think it was entirely a show to impress wrestling fans, which say, see how many Travis Scotts we have, or whichever celebrity was there. Look how cool we are. Look how many athletes are here. Look how many people from music here. Ooh, we've got a hip hopper. We've got a country music artist. Look at that. We're mainstream now. The Rock is here. John Cena's here. The Undertaker loves Rhea Ripley in a not at all awkward and weird kind of thing. Only wrestling fans think that walking your motorcycle around a ring looks badass. It looks silly. So I think they missed the assignment. They thought they were appealing to everyone else. I think they just appealed to the same old, and the same old in typical wrestling fan style. Ate it up and like, whoa, this is going to show the world that wrestling is cool. No, all it did is show the world that the biggest wrestling company in the world thinks that wrestling isn't all that important. It's more important to show Travis Scott or Travis Brown, whatever his name was, smoking a blunt and having freaking old Hulk Hogan, which anybody with any PR sense knows nobody wants to see Hulk Hogan on TV anymore. And the people that do will find him at a convention. And nobody cares about a new lager beer. No, one thing the world doesn't need is another lager beer.
I like wine, so I don't know. Beer to me, I just don't know. If you give me wine, I'll be good, but beer, nah. So exactly. I guess I'm gonna have to agree with you with that.
but does the world need another bland, mid California red blend? No, it's like
no. It really doesn't. But yeah, I could definitely see your point, dude. Like I get it. I get both sides of the argument now that we're like so far removed from it. But we're not so far removed from it, I guess if that's a good like segue, is the MLW Kino Coliseum pay-per-view, which we're going to jump right into right now. First of all, the show opens up with this amazing ladder match that had 5 briefcases hanging above the ring, and they had they were gonna have Kevin Knight. Kevin Knight obviously gets attacked by the Rogue Horseman, which I really, really love. So Kevin Knight gets taken out and gets replaced by our buddy, Mr. Thomas from the Boomay Fight Club. That, you know, hopefully Alex Kane gets back into MLW after what Eric Bischoff has done. But nonetheless, yeah, man, listen, even though I was working the event, I did not know that was going to happen. I was shocked like everybody else. I was like, what are you doing, Eric? Why are you doing that for? But yeah, so we had Kevin Knight being replaced with Mr. Thomas. Then we had BRG, which I hope I get his acronym right, because if not, it's gonna blow up in my face. We have Akira. I lovingly call him Deathmatch Akira because we have Akira Francesco of the United Empire in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So I just want to make that distinction. We had Matthew Justice, which is a cool dude, and we had Mags Kruger. First of all, Dose, what is your thoughts on this match?
Okay, so what a surprise that Mr. Thomas gets tagged in. So for those of you who don't know, I have 3 podcasts. They're all under the same title, Garden of Doom. But one of the titles is called GOD Presents the Book of Black. And that's because my co-host is PJ Black. So some of you might only know, well, you're on the Maria Shadow Show. You know Justin Gabriel, but you also know PJ Black. Same guy. But, you know, one of the guests was Mr. Thomas from MLW. And we got along so well that he's now been the co-host twice. And you know, I dare say I think that he'll carry the duties at least, the same amount as PJ does, maybe more. Who knows? And I call that the Gospel of Thomas. So Mr. Thomas is my friend, but Mr. Thomas also routinely calls himself the worst wrestler in the world. And then our other mutual friend, AJ Scales, when he refers to Mr. Thomas's wrestling, he usually uses the word flops. So I see him take the tag. You know, he's usually just the muscle. He's usually, you know, the bodyguard that doesn't fight that much, and he's in tag. He's doing like swanton flips out of the ring. He's at the top of the ladder. He's taking a spear out of the ring through a table down on the floor. I'm like, I didn't know this man had this in him. So I'm like going crazy. I'm like, yeah, of course I want him to win and everything, but. So this match for me, I had a personal, not just vested joy in it, but surprise, shock, and awe. I'm like DMing me. I'm like, did you know he had this in him?
I'm gonna agree with you because I was surprised too, and in my mind I was like, "Yo, that'd be mad cool, like if he wins or whatnot." Because I wasn't expecting Mr. Thomas to like tag in because Kevin Knight got jumped. I was like, "Oh my god, this is so cool!" But the whole entire match was so chaotic with all the ladders, everybody like doing something to each other. It was really great. If you guys have not checked it out, go check it out. It's free to watch on the MLW YouTube channel. And I do want to say that that's a very innovative concept in order to like get the contract to get a title shot, I believe, but you have to like search through the freaking briefcases. Very ingenious. Eric Bischoff came up with that idea. So shout out to Eric Bischoff. For everyone that wants to know, Mads Kruger ended up getting the contract. So now he gets to challenge the new champion when we talk about him a little bit later. Which, yeah, again, awesome match. Oh yeah,
still
I'm just looking
representing
through all of my
Contra.
notes.
Mads Kruger all these years. Now he's the top dog at Contra though.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking through all my notes. I was really detailed with
By the way,
like,
I mean, I assume does your audience know who the Rogue Horsemen are?
I have yet to really do like a deep dive into them, but it's basically C.W. Anderson along with Brock Anderson, the son to Arn Anderson. They are both awesome people. I talked about them when I was talking about me working at MLW One Shot. And then there's also BRG in there as well. I think I'm missing
Bobby
a guy.
Fish.
Oh, this
You're missing
Bobby Fish.
former
I'm sorry, Bobby
Undisputed.
Fish.
And for those of you that
Yeah.
BRG is sort of a hybrid of he's sort of like the brat wrestler, and he sort of plays the role of maybe both James J. Dillon and Ric Flair in the same vein. I mean, he's not either one of them. He's sort of that character combined. Maybe like a little variation of, like a younger sort of more entitled version of MJF, if though less edgy, but just as brash.
Yeah, and as you say that, I do tolerate BRG way more than MJF. I really do, because I like what happened?
Well, MJF his act has gotten stale. I think if he had better, directors and took direction better, or whatever the case might be, he could be like Piper. He could be a perennial, but I think that left to people's own devices, some people need an editor. Vince Russo needed an editor. Vince McMahon needed an editor. I think MJF needs an editor.
Totally agree with that. But yes, BRG is cool. The Rogue Horsemen have been really feuding with the Bumaye Club for a bit in different capacities, which has been very interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's fun. And Arn has appeared a couple times to sort of, loan. For those who don't know, Arn Anderson owns the Four Horsemen trademark now. That's a relatively new development. So if you buy Four Horsemen merchandise, it's actually going to benefit Arn directly. And if anybody remembers that sort of famous video where somebody filmed him receiving a package at his home, he lives in a regular person house, sort of row house style. Maybe there's breaks between the houses or not, but certainly not a mansion, not a big mansion. So help a legend out. Arn Anderson is actually he's one of the first guys I remember from watching Georgia Championship Wrestling. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but toot. I mean, I love Arn Anderson. So if you buy Four Horsemen merchandise, you are actually helping Arn Anderson, not WWE, not WCW, which owns WWE, not Ric Flair, who maybe you don't like for various reasons. It's actually going directly to Arn Anderson and probably to Brock as well.
That is amazing. I didn't know that information. That's wonderful to know. Yeah. So our next match is a lucha match with Atlantis Jr. and Atlantis, which is senior, versus Dark Panther and Blue Panther, another senior and junior sort of thing going on. Look, I didn't really write too much. I barely wrote notes, only because it's a lucha style. I've seen it before. However, I do want to point out that when MLW gets luchadors, their luchador matches I like. Only because it's I can see the psychology. I can see what they're doing. It's not too many flips and everything like that. But this match was actually refreshing to see, how they did it, how they approached it. What are your thoughts about MLW having luchadors on the roster and also the matches?
I have a few thoughts, but first I have a question for you, because I don't really know much about what MLW's business model is, nor who their major audiences are. So I don't know if they have a lot of viewership, a lot of following, if some of their major TV or platform contracts are in Latin America or not. Because if they are, it makes a whole lot more sense to me. So maybe you know the answer to that.
I mean, the closest answer that I could give you is that they do occasionally hold their lucha specific pay-per-view, which the title is escaping my mind right now, but they do hold a lucha exclusive pay-per-view down in Mexico. Their partners are CMLL. So this is where they get their luchadors from. And I could tell you from experience that because we have Mystico, his line on MLW One Shot for New York City, man, his line was the longest. Like I had to go get him and be like, yo, you're up. Like we have to go get you. Like your line is here. People are here. Everybody comes to see the luchadors. So they have a very strong fan base for it. If that somewhat like answers your question.
It does. And I remember very well, they've partnered with other, ICW, we would see Salvio Vega and, I know, Azteca Underground, which is sort of a homage or resurrection of Lucha Underground, sorts with, Dario Cueto, Cesar Duran, Selena de Levent. By the way, I love the telenovela sort of vignettes and montages or little scenes throughout the show. I mean, anything, I know it's not Lucha Underground. There probably will never be another Lucha Underground, but anything that's even close to it makes me happy. Okay, so I agree with you that the Lucha matches feel a little bit different, in MLW. This one, they made it was like a family feud. So you had good and evil in a family feud. You got the father and the son, or at least the next generation under the same name. That said, I could live with I think it would be better for them, unless I don't understand the business model or the audience, and it really is, again, Mystico being the giant draw, not just because it's Mystico, but because of that's the audience for Lucha, for MLW. I would rather them see them get like sort of more people from the indies in here and more traditional, rather than 2 or 3 Lucha matches on the card. Editorial aside, all of you folks who were pretending that, oh my God, AEW got us Mystico, oh my God, Hologram, he's amazing. Where have you been? These guys have been on a Hologram is Aramis. He was fighting Aries for basically a year and a half nonstop on MLW. Where were you then? And everyone's like, no, he's not. I'm like, yes, he is. And they looked at him like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm like, I know I'm right. So, all these hardcore wrestling fans, they're not the gatekeep. They're not hardcore at all. They're just pretending, or 94% of them are pretending. Anyway, I could do without 2 Lucha matches on my card, and I'm not really that big into old man wrestling. Listen, as an old man myself, I admire people who are in their 50s who can still do anything close to that. It's just not my favorite thing.
Yeah, even when I was watching this one and seeing, the older, the seniors wrestle, I was just like, oh man, it's a little. I felt a little bit bad, but that they love this business and they love the wrestling, so it's what they do. So since we're talking about this Lucha match, we'll talk about the other Lucha match, so we don't have to really go in order of my notes, so we can get the Lucha stuff out of the way. The other one, right? Which we had, I might butcher it because like sometimes my accent doesn't want to come through, but it Mascara Dorada, that's like me saying the most whitest way ever. And I'm half white. However, I do want to mention that in this match, we had a CMLL wrestler. His name is going to translate to Sphinx. However, when the ring announcer announced him, someone has to give him direction because it's gonna sound really weird because it's Esfinge, right?
Yes.
The way that the announcer introduced him, he pronounced that G so hard that in my mind, because I'm half Puerto Rican, I was like, so wait a minute, his name is the Finger? So I had to look it up to be like, nah, it can't be the Finger. Like, why would, a luchador name himself the Finger? That's the first thing I thought of. But no, it's Sphinx. But next time, if the ring announcer is listening to this, do not put so much emphasis on the G. Make it like a soft G when you say it, so that way it could just be Esfinge. Like, I'm doing it a little too hard when I'm saying it, but just do a softer G, so that way it doesn't sound like so weird. But then again, Spanish people throughout the cultures come up with like weird ass names for stuff, and I'm like, what? But I just want to mention that versus Aveno. This was a pretty good triple threat match. I don't know if you have like any thoughts on it, but I'm just gonna leave it at like it was a really good triple threat match. We need Esfinge like more in MLW and like other places.
Yeah, no, I thought this was actually a fun match, and Esfinge he's he's big for a luchador. They kept calling him a monster. I wouldn't exactly say he's a monster. He might be a monster, in CMLL, but this was an American show. But he's a big guy. He's sort of like a Black Taurus, build, but he's taller. I think he's taller anyway. I'm sorry, Blackmore. He's now the Beast Mordos. Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, good on Tony Khan for finally creating your own intellectual property and realizing when you changing names isn't that you're burying a wrestler, it's that you're actually creating something of extra value for your company. That when you sell merchandise, you actually make some money, you get revenue streams. Hence hologram, hence the Beast Mordos. Anyway, no, I like this match, and a couple of these guys were impressive. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing them. Actually, also, I think it was Atlantis Jr. He's actually pretty impressive as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing him in some stuff also. And I understand there's another Blue Demon, or am I wrong?
Blue Panther.
Okay, well, yeah. So anyway, yeah, I think this was good, but I one lucha match per card, I think, is enough for me.
So let's switch over to the women, because we had Janai Kai versus Delmo Exo, which I believe I pronounced that right, because I usually just say it. Yes, I say Delmi, and like when I was working the last event, somebody was like, "Did you call her dummy?" And I'm like, "No, I said Delmi." Like it's as a little nickname. But like, how people are like, "Hey, I think I misheard you." Both of them are amazing in MLW and like what they have been able to cultivate, which I was, I like this match. Both hard hitting, very big, powerful strikes, I should say. But in the end, Dummy Exo is our new featherweight champion.
Yes. Allow me to not have the favoritism of choosing my friend as the favorite match. Though once we're off the show, that will be my favorite again. This was my favorite match of the card. And by the way, anyone who's known me for a long time, and some of you probably do, some of you remember me from being in the Solid Monster Sounds Off Facebook group and the moderator there for a bit and whatever. I wasn't a women's wrestling as a piss break kind of thing, because those are what commercials are, but I was never a women's wrestling fan. I mean, like, I was like all about brown panty matches. And like the last 5 or 6 years, I'm a complete convert. I mean, some of my favorite matches and wrestlers are the women's wrestling. And this was an excellent match. And I know it's not the same promotion, but there was an excellent match on NWA this week with Tiffany Nieves against Natalia Markova. And just the women are killing it up and down, but this was a great match. Janai Kai is a unique kind of character, sort of a throwback where like almost like a Luna Vachon, but not as big, almost like Luna Vachon and Loki had a daughter who became a wrestler. I mean, I don't know, it's like she's sort of like, sort of like the barbaric, like pit fighter kind of thing that, like, you'd see in like a Bloodsport movie, but women's division. But yeah, Delmi Exo won, which is great. She's terrific. A great match, and it was a loss for Contra. Yes, Janai Kai is part of Contra, yeah, best match of the night. I if you love women's wrestling, check out this match. If you don't love women's wrestling but you like it, I would also say check out this match.
Yes, and the match was title versus hair as well. But luckily, like, Dummy didn't have to cut her hair. She got the belt.
And Janai doesn't have much hair. She's got a mohawk. So
yeah, sometimes I would like to know how she ends up braiding her hair. I know she has to like flip her hair over, but like the way she does the braid is like so neat and so nice that I'm like, yeah, I can't do that right now.
I'll tell you how off camera. I'll give you my beauty secrets then.
That'd be cool. The next one after that is Dijak versus Kenta. I get to finally see Kenta again. I just didn't get the chance to like interact with him. I need to interact with Kenta because I love Kenta. But Dijak, man, like I love watching this guy wrestle in the ring. Like he's so good at what he does. Obviously, Kenta is good at what he does. But this was just hard hitting. To the point where Dijak was probably like, Kenta needs to stay down. But yeah, what did you think of this one?
It was, I mean, one, he came out with Saint Laurent. So, I mean, and I'm used to seeing Saint Laurent with Microman. So,
Yeah.
what a difference. I don't know that Dijak needs Saint Laurent. I don't think the Dijak needs anyone for extra heat. I mean, there's probably other people that might benefit from that more, but that's aside. This was a hard-hitting match. Dijak obviously was someone who was, released by WWE and non-renewed, and I think he was a little bit surprised by it. I think a lot of people were a little bit surprised by it. But he didn't whine or cry. He did a few interviews, sounded professional. He's not burning any bridges, and he's sort of doing the Matt Cardona thing. He's going to the Indies. He's working hard. He's getting on, TV cards, like MLW, and I'm sure that we'll see him in lots of other places. I'm sure eventually we'll see him in Bloodsport or GCW or, maybe doing an arc in NWA or whatnot. But hard-hitting match. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I'm pretty glad that they booked it for Dijak to win because he's new and he's big, and however good Kenta is, and he's been described as the best wrestler in the world. A lot of people think that.
Yeah.
Including Mr. Thomas, by the way. When he tells me he's the worst wrestler in the world, he says Kenta's the best wrestler in the world. I mean, that's usually the context of it. But Dijak's new, and he's their new monster and a new monster heel, and they already have Mads Kruger, and they just add Babatunde. So I think it was important for him to win to show that they're taking him seriously, and he's a force to be reckoned with within the MLW universe. So a pleasant sort of surprise because I actually thought they'd have Kenta win.
That's true. I am like a super huge Kenta fan. Like I love Kenta, but I do have to agree with your assessment too that building up Dijak this way is very good as well, because then that positions him to maybe go after the MLW title and to get other opportunities and to fight other big guys in MLW and stuff like that. So I think it's a good approach for Dijak.
And like non-kayfabe, I think that's generous of both Kenta and Court Bauer and the MLW team. I mean, they didn't have to do that. They can have someone who's probably not signed for a long term, probably just for a few tapings. Maybe not, or maybe he will sign long term, but probably right now, committed to 6 months of, which is probably 4 shows. And not have, arguably their biggest non-ex-WWE star in the company being Kenta, lose on one of their big events. So I think that was very generous of everyone involved, and maybe it shouldn't be considered generous, but in 2025 it sort of is. There's a lot of egos in wrestling. There always has, but it's front and foremost, and I think this showed a lack of ego and some vision to have something compelling and build a new menace outsider, who's got the backing of a power in the office in Saint Laurent. I just thought it was a good call. I mean, chef's kiss.
Yeah. Kenta sacrifices a lot for certain things when it comes to like his matches and what they're going to be doing. And also I did think I just wanted to clear something or clarify something that like I wasn't working this event, but like eventually I want to meet Kenta, like in MLW, work with him, talk with him, and like pick his brain. I didn't get to do that. I wasn't at this event. I was at the other event. Mixed them up. Oh well. I just wanted to mention that. It was bothering me. I was like,
I want you to
what
get
happened?
that. I want you to get that too.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. So we went over the second luchador thing, and then we get Eric Bischoff, appearing on screen talking about Super Fight 6 in Atlanta. If you guys have not gotten your tickets, please make sure you get your tickets. They're like $15. You can't go wrong. You really cannot go wrong by going to the MLW show. And I think this is where Eric Bischoff was explaining how like he set up a couple matches, because I know that like Alex Kane has like a return match when it comes to Super Fight 6. And then right after that, we get the Paul Walter Hauser segment that was a promo segment. So you had him come out, say what he had to say, and then it was okay. So this is what I have in my notes. I'm just gonna read it how I have it. BRG versus PWH, and then we get Alex Kane to come up. He comes out, he shows up, and then it's Alex Kane fighting CW, because then the Rogue Horsemen come out, and then we have Mr. Thomas for the backup. Then we have Paul London, and then we have Bobby Fish, and that's what I wrote. What do you think about this segment?
Okay. So Paul Walter Hausen is somebody who I know he has a Golden Globe or maybe Emmys. I know he's on Cobra Kai and some other stuff. I've never seen him in anything other than the first time I was introduced to him was AEW when he was doing that Golden Globe thing and Jarrett stole it and it went nowhere. And I'm like, this is why I hate celebrities in wrestling. And he responded to me basically like something like, "Who asked you?" but politely. He's like, everyone's entitled to opinion. So I actually sort of like someone who will slap me, but like with a glove, instead of a sledgehammer. Especially when you're, so much more in status than I am. He's trying. He's trying. I didn't find this to be a particularly impactful segment. Basically, him and BRG ran into each other in the staircase. Paul's going down, BRG's going up, and BRG's basically talking shit to him, and Paul is basically no selling and acting like, "I'm not afraid of you," and BRG's not taking him seriously because Paul is not a physically imposing guy. He's a fat guy, and I'm a fat guy too, but he's also much younger than me, and and he's probably fatter than me, but but he's and basically they're gonna have a match, and Paul's basically no saying, "Hey, no problem, buddy, I'll see you," and he sort of gives him a friendly love tap, not exactly that you would give on the back, but he gives on the front of the chest. So this was actually entertaining because this is probably what what BRG and PWH should be doing. They probably should be facing each other because they're both sort of the extreme of outrage. I don't know how good Paul Walter Hausen is in the ring or how good he has to be, but it's interesting. I mean, it's something. He is an actual, he is a real Hollywood person with credentials, and he had choices. He could probably have been on WWE if he wanted to. He was on AEW, and he's chosen to be on MLW. So, I mean, just for that, it should be interesting.
Yeah. So Paul Walter Hauser, he's been doing a lot of hardcore matches for the time being. In MLW, I haven't seen him do an actual wrestling match just yet. But he ends up getting I don't know why my brain wanted to be he ends up getting the table, but he ends up getting the garbage can and all the hardcore stuff. But I do think that putting him with BRG will give him a little bit more experience in just what to do and how to think and whatnot. At one point, I believe PWH teamed up with Matthew Justice to have that little mini hardcore match and whatnot, and that helped them out. But it is very interesting just to see him around and interact with him for a little bit, because I shook his hand the last time that I was there at MLW to be "Hey, I'm Marie Shadows, blah blah blah. This is what I'm doing today." Which, by the way, that's what I do every time that if I'm going to be working events, I always go around and shake people's hand and be like, "Hey, I'm so and so. I'm helping out, or I'm doing this. If you need me, I'm available." Just like when I was mentioning in the previous podcast episodes, for those that didn't listen, I was everywhere. I was doing something for somebody. That's what I was doing. Other than that, we have come to the main event of MLW Kingdom Colosseum, which was Kojima versus Matt Riddle. I would just like to say that being in the presence of Kojima back at MLW One Shot was amazing. To hear him not only speak Japanese and then switch to Spanish, I was like, what am I hearing right now? This is so cool. But just to be in the presence of Kojima is awesome. To be in the presence of Matt Riddle is also awesome. He was a fantastic, I don't know why I want to say gentleman. People are probably going to get on me for that, but me working with him, helping him out during the meet and greets, and then getting the high five and the recognition from Matt Riddle to help out that day at MLW One Shot still means a lot to me. So awesome! This match was fantastic for a main event. Hard hitting, a lot of I guess what's the word? False pinfalls, false kickouts,
false finishes.
What is it? There we go. False finishes. Just so you know, on the Square Circle podcast, we're here to make up words sometimes because we forget other words. Kojima took so many bumps as well as Matt Riddle, but it really like set a standard for like what it means to be an MLW champion. But in the end, Matt Riddle did end up getting the MLW championship. So congratulations to Matt Riddle. And I think that Kojima is still tag team champion because they got the tag team champions, the championships. So I don't think he's going to go back to New Japan anytime soon. But yeah, that's where we are. That's where we're at. Your thoughts?
This is going to sound stupid, but I thought Kojima was taller than he was. I mean, he's certainly thick, but I thought he was taller than he was. I didn't realize he was shorter than Matt Riddle. And Matt Riddle's not a particularly tall person. I mean, I know they list him as 6'1" at WWE, but he's not 6'1". He might be 5'11". And I know what you mean by Matt Riddle. He's very personable, in real life encounters. I mean, obviously, his most famous real life encounter was probably at one of his worst moments in the airport, and there were some other, there was other stuff with the ex, and it's really hard to judge those things from everyone makes judgments, but nobody's in those stories. But I have met Matt Riddle in very limited ways, so to say I know him is a gross exaggeration. I know him a wee bit. Once was several years ago on like a conference, like a group, like FaceTime call where people woke me up on this network I was, sort of working with. And Matt Riddle was one of the people because he was very friendly with some of them in real life. And then I saw him at Maryland Championship Wrestling like last year. And this is like 5 years later or 4 years later. And I went up to him and he remembered me. He's like, "Hey, man, I did it." I'm like, "You remember that?" He's like, "I have a really good memory." And what you think of Matt Riddle is a pothead, so you don't normally think really great memory, but he did. He initiated the memory sequence. Like I didn't say, I didn't say like, "Hey, I'm from Unpopular Review," or "I was on Unpopular Review." He's like, "Yeah." He even said, "Tell Chris I say hi," which I mean. I still talk to Chris, but not often. So if somebody remembers me, I'm unless they screw me, I'm sort of theirs forever. I mean, so I was really happy to see him win and get some success. I mean, I understand why WWE released him, and sometimes that's for the best for everybody. But he is their biggest star. He's the biggest marquee name in MLW. I'm sorry, Kenta fans or whatever, but he is. Or Minoru Suzuki fans, Matt Riddle is, and he's also, he's under 40. So, this is going to get some attention, and Riddle is a champion, and you're right, it was a good match, and Riddle came out of the MMA world, and Kojima's, certainly being a Japanese legend, wrestling probably for 30 years now, probably longer. He's not afraid of taking those hard shots, especially from a guy who, probably, weighs 25 pounds less than him. So this was really a perfect pairing. I think a good way for Riddle to win it. It was one of those respect matches. Nobody was a heel, but it worked. It still worked.
It was fantastic. By the way, to piggyback off of the story of when wrestlers remember you, that always stops me in my tracks, and I'm like, I fangirl a little bit inside, but like part of me is like, no, you don't. Like I don't know, man. It's just because I think wrestlers just see everybody like all the time, and they have their own lives, and sometimes they're not really thinking about all the fans that they met. So sometimes when they do that. Sometimes when they do that, I'm just like, are you sure? But then I go along with it.
and shout out to another one who right now is the AEW Women's Championship, Mariah May. I booked an interview for her for that same outfit. I didn't even do the interview. I figured it would look better for the 22-year-old girl to be interviewed by the 18-year-old kid on our team, and I would just produce it from the back. And I saw her, and I said hello, and I said, I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago we did it. She goes, yeah, I remember. You produced it. You didn't do the interview. Yeah, I said I want to have the younger guy because I thought that would look less creepy or more natural, would be a different vibe. She's like, no, I really appreciate it. I remember. Thanks. That was a great. And she she said these words, very British. Nice to see you again. I mean, it's. I know that's nothing, but it's something.
Yeah, I totally get that. I rather it be something. It's something to us, you know. I feel like for me it's a way of giving back to all the wrestlers that put their bodies on the line and like, hit that mat and stuff. I mentioned
It's
this from
such a
like,
high class phrase, though. Nice to see you again.
yeah.
That's like what diplomats' wives say. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
or diplomats' husbands. But it was just, I don't know. It it made me feel special, and she also made a big deal about meeting my wife and stepson and all that, and so that was cool.
Yeah, and that's exactly how interactions should go. Very nicely, no hostility, no stupidity, no what we like see on Twitter and stuff. Like they're still human beings at the end of the day, and they're real life people,
And I was shocked.
that goes through
I'm like, you're
what
in
happened?
AEW now. You're too big to be at Maryland Championship Wrestling. But no, she was
Mm,
and was sweet. By the way, who well, I don't think she remembers, but who Haley J was there, and she was super
ah,
cool. What a super like genuine individual.
yeah, yeah. You could definitely see that whenever she talks and people who interview her and people who are around her. Well, that wraps up the review portion of MLW. Your overall thoughts and/or advice for MLW and for fans that have yet to go to an MLW show.
Well, I think you should go to a show because I mean people glamorize the ECW arena, but I think the closest thing you'll get to an ECW show is probably MLW. The environment, I mean, locations is the same a lot of times. Though they're traveling more, and they probably won't be back to Philly till the end of the year because of I think construction and renovations. I thought the card was good. You already heard what I said about that. Probably I would have preferred like if they had like two people who were sort of big on the indies face each other or a tag team match rather than a second lucha match. I could live without
Yeah,
the
yeah.
father son thing, but aside from that's good. But listen, to we're recording January 25th. I don't know how quickly you're going to put the show out, but tonight there is an MLW show on YouTube. They're smart. It starts at 10 o'clock Eastern after Saturday night's main event. They're not trying to compete with it. So listen, if you watch Saturday night's main event, just switch over to YouTube and watch an MLW show. You get a perfect chance. If this is put out afterwards, it'll still be there on YouTube. So check it out. And listen, if there's matches you don't like, you can fast forward on YouTube. Like 10 seconds, 30 seconds. It's easy. So check it out. Give it a chance. Everyone out there is always saying, enjoy all wrestling, support indie wrestling, support all promotions. But most of you don't. And guess what? Neither do I. I don't support all promotions. But I have picked a couple of your smaller promotions, NWA and MLW in particular, and some of the NWA territories, and I try to support them. So if you want to see neutral dose or good dose instead of evil dose, support MLW.
You're gonna be like you're gonna have three dose. Not really, not no. That was
Evil
bad. I mean
Trey.
like three evil. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're gonna yeah, that's exactly what's gonna happen.
Aren't you the one that's half Latina?
Yes, I'm Puerto Rican Italian.
I'm Latino by marriage, so I don't have that.
I'll accept it. Latino by marriage.
Yeah, if it count for Charlotte Flair and Alistair Malachi Black, then it should count for me.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, Alistair Black has
Listen,
Selena.
she's not just Latina. She's from South America. I mean, she's Ecuador. This is all the way Latina.
Yeah. Yeah,
Whatever that means.
I'll give it I'll give it a pass. You're cool beans anyway, so
I'm
it
cool.
doesn't really matter.
I'm frio frijoles.
Yes. All right, man. Plug your stuff away. Tell people where they can find you. What's happening on your podcast. When is Mr. Thomas returning? All that kind of stuff.
Okay, so hopefully Mr. Thomas is returned because Mr. Thomas is right now in Mexico City. He could live in his best life. But Monday night we're supposed to record with Jeremy Prophet, who he was on AEW a couple times. Sort of looks like Jungle Boy if he took the wrestling business seriously. But it was in better shape. I mean, different texture and skin color and all that. But looking forward to that. Monday night we're going to have him on, so that'll be a Gospel of Thomas. Looking to book a few other people. I have a commitment from GCW's Nasty Leroy. I've been in talks with some other people and doing that. The Prime show is Garden of Doom. In transition of changing the name to Garden of Thoughts, waiting for some show art and whatnot, but just dropped a show yesterday, which was with Dr. Ed Barnhart, who some of you might know from Earth Ancients. He's one of their guests. He was on Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse season 2. He was in 2 episodes. He's an archaeologist, and he's been on the show before, and we're talking about, titularly we've been talking about Incas, but the Incas are more recent than I thought, so it was all Andean cultures, myth, legend, lore, history, so it's that, and the couple shows ago was with Keegan Dimitrievich, who's a Canadian indie wrestler, but he's also a master's student in Canadian Indigenous literature. So we talked a lot about stuff like that. And and the show in between was Canaanite God. So there's quite a lot of variety on Garden of Doom. Garden Views is sort of like a companion show, but it's more, okay, so Garden of Doom is sort of like the History Channel after, like primetime and later at night. Garden Views is more like the typical magazine show with business, legal, variety, realpolitik. I overachieve in a lot of my guests, and then you've already heard what Garden of Doom Book of Black Gospel of Thomas is. So those are my things. I do some shows on Wrestling Soup. I do Body Slam briefs for Wrestling Soup, which they're between 7 and 30 minutes long. They come up when they come up, and that's the intersection of where wrestling and law get in the hook and what is it? What do they call it when they lock up in the ring?
It's collar. Just a collar and elbow tie up.
Right? Yeah, when law and wrestling go in the collar and elbow, and that happens a lot. I've been doing the SmackDown review show, but we didn't do one this week. Again, that's Wrestling Soup, and I don't know. I'm around. I'm on PWT sometimes. I go into spaces. Me and this other guy, we did a show called The Watchmen. There's all of 2 episodes. It's on the Hammerlock Hangover Spreaker feed, but we'll probably do some more. It's not for entertainment. It's like the PBS Business Hour of wrestling podcast. So if you're looking for entertainment, go someplace else. But if you want just data and information and at least good faith analysis, even if it turns out that we're wrong, that's a good place. I've gotten good feedback on it. So, but that's probably, follow me on X at Dose Evil or at Icarus FellMD. But Dose Evil is where you're going to get the wrestling nonsense.
And I do recommend either checking out the tweets by either Dose Evil and or our other buddy MJ, whenever they talk about like numbers and like break all that stuff down. Like I find that interesting because numbers is not really my strong suit, but I do understand like maybe the basics. But I would say go follow them. Go follow Dose Evil. On my side, I'm Marie Shadows. I have a wrestling planner that is available on Barnes & Nobles called One More Match. It's a 2025 edition. So there's like 3 sections. There's a 7-star match rating. There's a calendar. There's a travel budget. It's made for wrestlers, commentators, podcasters, content creators, everybody. Is available on Barnes and Nobles. The link for that will be down in the description when this goes up because it's a very long URL, but it's on Barnes and Nobles. Follow me on Twitter at Marie_Shadows. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and also leave a comment on youtube.com/Square Circle Podcast. Square Circle Podcast is also on Spotify. And also follow my newsletter, marieshadows.substack.com. So that way you know how I debunk Dave Metzler. And with that, Dose, thank you so much for joining me on this review of MLW. It was like super, super, super fun. Super fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It really was an honor. I had a great time. I hope that we do things together in the future. And my last word to everyone is support LuFisto. She's a legend. She deserves better than what she's been getting, and she needs your help. Yes,
do that because it's really, really stupid and bad, and we got to come together and help her out in any way we can. Then again, we could also just end it with LuFisto was right. With that being said. With that, all right, guys, we will catch you all in the next one. So we'll see you soon. Bye.
Stable, my friends.